Hello and welcome to this jazz harmony and arranging series. This series is based on a book by Gary Lindsay entitled Jazz Arranging Techniques from Quartet to Big Band. Gary Lindsay is an awesome composer, arranger, and performer who has worked with renowned jazz musicians such as Maynard Ferguson, Pat Metheny, and Arturo Sandoval. I strongly recommend you purchase this book at lindsayjazz.com if this topic interests you. That way you can follow along with this series, completing assignments to help you practice the topics we've discussed. Now let's get started with Chapter 1, Elements of an Arrangement. The first thing we're going to talk about are the elements of music. I believe there are 6 main elements of music: sound or texture, melody, harmony, rhythm, form, and external influence. But today we're going to focus on melody, harmony, countermelody, which is a subcategory of melody, and rhythmic pulse. The first element we're going to talk about is melody. Melody is typically the main theme of the music, consists of both pitch and rhythm, and can be as long or short as the composer or arranger desires. When you listen to rock music, the element performed by the singer is usually the melody. In jazz, the melody can be performed by a singer or any instrument, including the bass guitar or mallet instruments like the vibraphone. In musical terms, a typical melody consists of fragments of arpeggios and scales. An arpeggio is a string of notes that move by skip according to the music staff, and scales move by step. So here we have a melody that starts with an ascending arpeggio, then moves into a descending scale. Boo-ba-doo-be-ah-ba-da-ba-do. Melodies that have a lot of scale patterns and move mostly by step are called conjunct melodies. Melodies that have a lot of arpeggiated patterns and large skips are called disjunct melodies. Most melodies contain a mixture of the two. Now, a melody could be played by one instrument, 2 or more instruments, but in the same octave, or 2 or more instruments in multiple octaves. This would be called unison. Now, the other style of melody that we have is called 2D style. Now, in the 2D style, you have 2 or more instruments playing different notes but the same rhythm, or essentially creating harmony. There's another style of melody called contrapuntal style. Now, in this style, you have 2 or more instruments, just like in 2D style. However, you have different notes and different rhythms. So, an example of this could be like call and response, or you have a saxophonist improvising a melody, and the pianist may do a quick response before the saxophone starts his next phrase. Lastly, a lot of good musicians will say a good melody should be singable, whether it's a unison, 2D, or counter melody. So keep that in mind when you're writing melodies. The next thing let's talk about is harmony. So your harmony can typically be provided by a guitar or a piano, some instrument that can play multiple notes at once. It could also be a bass. But in jazz ensembles, if you've got a couple horns or you've got a full big band of 13 horns, your harmony could be provided by your horn section in addition to your rhythm section. So for example, you can have your saxophones. Typically there's 5 saxophones in a big band, 2 altos, 2 tenors, and a bari. You can have a 5-voice harmony just between them, and they could be accompanying the trombones, which might have a unison melody. Harmony can either be long and sustained or short and rhythmic. So for example, you could have a G major 7 chord in 4/4 time. That would be a sustained chord. Now you could also have a G major 7 chord that instead of being sustained comes out as like a rhythmic hit. The next topic we want to cover is counterpoint or counter melody. A counter melody is a melodic response to the main melody. So let's say we've got your main melody up top, and then on the bottom in red, we've got our counter melody here. You've got your first melody playing here, and then you can hear that the second melody responded to that. The final component that we need to talk about is our rhythmic pulse. Now, rhythmic pulse is really important in jazz because jazz is a music that can really be felt by rhythm. Percussion and a drum beat can be really simple, just like ding da da ding da da ding da da ding da, or it could be really complex and a little bit more spontaneous with a purpose. For example, if you're in the shout section of a big band chart, the drummer might be outlining the hits of the trumpets. Now, in Latin music, there's a lot of extra percussion instruments that really make that sound. So, texture and rhythm in jazz is extremely, extremely prominent. Your rhythmic pulse can also serve as counterpoint. Your melody might go like this, and your drums might respond like this. So let's talk about instrumentations for melody, harmony, counter melody, and rhythmic pulse. So let's say you've got all four of those elements in one big band piece, let's say. So for example, your melody could be your trumpets in unison. Harmony could be your trombones and saxes. Counter melody could be your guitar. And then your rhythmic pulse could be your drums. Let's think of our jazz combo. So let's say we've got a tenor sax on the melody, piano playing out harmony, say a trumpet on the counter melody, and a rhythmic pulse could be drums and Latin percussion. Now let's look at one more scenario. Let's say we've got a jazz trio, bass, guitar, and drums. So, for example, our melody can be provided by our bass player, harmony provided by guitar, and let's say our drummer is being a little bit more active. Now, just because the drummer is being active doesn't mean we can say that this is a counter melody because our drummer is not relaying pitch. So that's the difference. Contrapuntal is more a response in general. Counter melody is a specific response. It's a melodic response. So we would just have the drums laying down a rhythmic pulse, but we can put in parentheses that he's being contrapuntal. All right, now the last thing that we can talk about is trying to identify these four different elements in music. So what you can do is go to a live performance, or you can go on YouTube, listen to some bands, try to hear which instrument is playing which element. Do you have a tenor sax playing the melody, or is a bass player playing the melody? Is it a piano player playing the chords, or is it a guitar? Listen to see if you can hear what kind of melody. Is it a unison melody? Is it unison in octaves? Is it full tutti? Is there a counter melody? Who's playing the counter melody? And what kind of rhythmic pulse do you have? Your drummer could be providing the rhythmic pulse, but he could also be accompanied by Latin percussion or some other means of percussion. Alright, thanks for watching this week's video, Chapter 1 of Jazz Arranging Techniques by Gary Lindsay. Next week we'll be talking about Chapter 2, which covers calligraphy and how to write swing notation in the jazz style. I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope that you stay tuned.